Hello and welcome everyone to the Gaia Journey, to our exhale session. My name is Antoinette and I am one of the hosts of today's special session. And we have been in this together for 12 weeks now. So this is week 12. And it is a joy to see you all here. And I'm just trying to see all the different people. We are threading 4 rooms together again. So we normally only reserve this feature for our Zoom sessions in our inhales, but today we are enabling many of us to come together in 4 different Zoom rooms and connect across those Zoom rooms as we have invited in special guests. So I'll invite us to land in the journey together by sharing just a little bit of our journey together, which for many of you who have joined us numerous times, week after week, this will not be new to you. And for those of you who may just be joining, welcome to you and thank you for being here. I'll give you a little taste of what we've been up to, but you can follow along at GaiaJourney.org, where you can get more information and check out what we've been up to over the last few weeks that got us to this point. So we are in the exhale. We're week 12, June 12th, of our global activation of intention and action. Our journey has consisted of an inhale and exhale. And part of that has been that we started this in a moment of global transition when we were realizing that we were facing a global pandemic. And as we did that, we knew that we needed a kind of digestive experience to be able to process this as a global community and understand what was going on individually and as a collective. We have been meeting over the days and weeks to be able to connect with each other in these inhale times. And we'll be moving up to next week is our final inhale, and we'll be moving up to our global forum. And what we're doing is, as you can see, it's kind of outside of what we would normally do, in that we are meeting in an exhale week. And we recognize that what's been happening in the world, Gaia has been a kind of emergent place to kind of process what's been emerging in our world. But that this week in the exhale, where we would normally turn to our local communities, and hopefully we are still, many of us, doing that, that we also might need more connection with each other in order to process what's happening in our world. So we've been doing this in the early part, doing this kind of staying with process, deep listening and dialogue, a deep resonance process, and now kind of moving with. So looking at where we can actually take action. And what we've seen that this is happening on an individual level and it's happening on a global level. So each of these weeks in social solidarity circles, we've been meeting in hubs around topics of interest. We've had over 180 hubs. We've had over 7,000 people join us in each inhale. We've had over 13,000 people with us in the journey, over 70 countries, and over 8 language tracks, meeting in varying communities and cultural conversations. And as we've been doing that, we started with this kind of slowing down experience with COVID-19. But that actually opened up our ability to see and sense. So in each of these weeks, we've almost been doing that kind of staying with deep resonance and moving with experience. But over these many weeks, we've been seeing that that's been happening. It's been, as we've been doing that, we start to actually experience some of these long-held systemic injustices and systemic inequalities. So now that we've been sitting with that for quite some time, we start to actually move into a different form of movement building. And we've been seeing that on a global scale. So we've been seeing throughout the United States, I stand in what is now known as New York and Cortlandt Manor, which were once lands of the Lenape. And in these spaces, we've seen people rising up. And then we've seen people rising up all over the world for systemic injustice and for dismantling these systems of injustice and inequality, violence, and racism. So now we stand together and look at what is the inner work that we need to do. Arawana said to us earlier that what we need is a paradigm shift, and that starts with the body. So much of what we're going to be doing today is connecting with what is the shift that's needed now and feeling into that deeply with our bodies and our felt sense. So we're in many ways glad to be here together, and at the same time knowing that this is the work that we need to do. So as much as it's a joy to be here with you all, it's also feels critical that we are here together. So with that, I turn it over to Otto to introduce our session further.
Thank you, and welcome also here from the Boston area, the land of the Massachusetts. And I want to begin with introducing our co-facilitators, co-faculty, and guides through this journey. Angel Acosta has just completed his PhD at Columbia University. And for the last decades, he has worked to bridge the fields of leadership, college access, and social justice and mindfulness. He works with a variety of communities and institutions, including the New York City Department of Education, UNICEF, and we are so glad, Angel, that you're joining us back here for this session. Melanie Goodchild is Anishinaabe from Bichigong Nishnabek First Nation in Northern Ontario, Canada. She is a PhD candidate in social and ecological sustainability at the University of Waterloo and the founder of Turtle Island Institute, a global indigenous social innovation think and do tank. And Melanie, thank you so much after the profound session you led with us last week for rejoining us for this session too. Arawana Hayashi is a choreographer, performer, and educator. She also is co-founder of the Presencing Institute and the creator of a new social art form called social presencing theater, which many of us here, those of you who attended kind of, some of the earlier Inhale session, already experienced and already found to be an extremely helpful guide to move a conversation that sometimes tends to be stuck in the head towards accessing and including the knowing of our whole body. Thank you, Arawana, for rejoining us also for this session. And Kelby Bird, who is artist, also co-founder of the Presencing Institute, and creator of another social art form that is so critical for us these days, which is generative scribing. And you see in her background just a wonderful example thereof. And of course, throughout kind of the Gaia journey, we have seen from Kelby and from Olaf and others wonderful example of this new social art form. Thank you, Kelby, for joining us again. With Antoinette, who of course you know well, and myself, the six of us will be co-holding this session together with all of you, knowing that what we try to lean into is actually more than any one of us can hold. And that's why we need each other to at least begin this journey. The flow of the session will be that at the beginning, Angel will take us on a journey that helps us to see and sense what's going on today in the context of the 400 plus years. Arawana then will help us to feel into the deeper resonances of this current situation, and continue the process through an embodied knowing practice. And then from there, Melanie will guide us through a ceremonial practice that will help us to fully, arrive into the current situation, and to also will help us to broaden our view, because what's happening right now here in the United States, which is the primary focus of the session, is of course a pattern that happens around the world. And that happens not only, between, racial injustice and inequality and violence, but also with many other, across many other fault lines, that we have been under-attending to for so long. So that's another aspect that Melanie will hold us and guide us into. And then from there, we'll be going into breakout conversations and have like a plenary dialogue where we are really invited to relate what we sense here also to our own context, our own communities, our own countries, and how it shows up there. Before turning it over to Angel, I want to start with another remark on what does it mean to approach this conversation from a viewpoint of awareness-based systems change. So it means that we also not only pay attention to the outer, but also the inner condition. And when I look at my own feelings over the past few weeks, I'm noticing two things. The first one is that over the past few weeks, and in the context of the murdering of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, and of Ahmaud Arbery, I found myself crying more than any time before in my life. And I'm sure that's true for many of us. And I think it's an indicator for an opening that happens now around the world on the level of the collective. So that's one data point, you could say. And the other data point is when I see the Black Lives Matter movement taking to the streets and owning the streets, not only in this country, but around the world. And when I joined them, for example, in my own small town that I'm living in, what I'm experiencing is something very profound, because it feels like when you see these people, when you see all these young people showing up, it feels like the birth of a new movement that's going to reshape not only the face of this country, but the face of our civilization, that has the possibility for doing that. That's what it feels like. So those are kind of the two feelings I'm sitting with, which are actually related to the same phenomenon. So what it feels like is that there is something breaking down on the level of our feelings that maybe has kept us separate in the past. 31 years ago, we saw the collapse of the Berlin Wall, which ended the Cold War system. The Cold War system was a system where we had a conflict between two social systems, capitalism and socialism, in confrontation with each other. Today, we see the collapse of another wall, which has to do with how we connect to the systems, to our system that we connect with. Ubi Rassi Patacho, the indigenous leader from Brazil and Gaia faculty during one of the earlier Inhale sessions, he claimed that if we want to change the system, we need to be the system. And when you look at that principle, we need to be the system, from the lens of awareness-based systems change, then I would say there are like 3 types of barriers that prevent us, that have in the past prevented us from doing so. The first barrier and wall, kind of that kept us from connecting with what's going on is, or you can say the first blind spot that has kept us from doing that is ignorance. Ignorance means not seeing what's going on. And with all the videos, with all the pictures going on and the social media going on right now, that's about to end. The second blind spot is not feeling what I'm seeing. So it's a wall that connects me on an disconnects me on an emotional level from what's really going on. And every human being who saw the 8 minutes, 46 seconds, I think experienced that wall to break down. So that is a massive collective experience we all have been just having with each other. And the third blind spot is apathy. It's not acting on what I know and what I feel. And that wall, right, that separates us on the level of the will is also coming down, as we see in the toppling of the racist statues all over the world, and as we also see in the significant changes that are beginning to happen across in dealing with systemic racism. So when I look at this, when I look at these 3 blind spots and the 3 walls that prevented me from seeing, from sensing and feeling, and from acting on what I see and know, I feel that on the one hand, I feel 2 things. I feel shame to the degree that my own not seeing and not feeling and not acting has contributed to this unspeakable condition that we collectively enact. And on the other hand, when I experience these walls that kept us separate breaking down, as we do it now, I am inspired by the massive possibility of reimagining and reshaping our societies and our civilization in a way that is focusing on the health and the thriving and flourishing and well-being of all. So with that framing up front, I want again express my gratitude to you, Angel, to and the rest of us, the rest of the guides that I just introduced, to take us on a journey where we all can actively participate in the breaking down of these barriers, of these walls that intentionally or unintentionally kept enabling the structural violence that until today still is going on. Angel.
Good to see you, Otto. Always a pleasure to share space with you and the team, Arawana, Melanie, and the Social Presencing Institute. I want to begin by saying thank you, to the team, and to everybody who's here from all over the world. I see so many different countries represented. Mexico, ¿cómo están? I see France, ça va? I see folks from everywhere. So thank you for being here with us. It's a really powerful moment to come together as a community and process many of the things that Otto has framed. And today's journey, we've conceptualized it as kind of a collective opportunity to think about healing in the context of the systemic and structural inequalities that have been in place for many years. I want to begin by just thanking my ancestors, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and many of the people who have been part of my lineage that have brought me here today. I acknowledge the territory from which I communicate to you from. I'm in the Bronx, New York, formerly Wappinger and Lenape land. I acknowledge them, and I acknowledge the stolen land that we stand upon. And I am grateful for having the opportunity to live on these lands. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of concepts. I just finished my doctoral experience at Teachers College, Columbia University. And right when I finish, and as I was finishing, a global pandemic unfolded, COVID-19. So we have been faced with several levels of crises. COVID-19 on one layer, and then the racial violence that comes at the hands and by the hands of the police state in the United States, which has resulted in a global response to institutionalized racism. So the thousands of people who have hit and have been in the streets protesting to say that we will no longer put up with the devaluation of Black life. We will no longer put up with the murder of innocent civilians. So I come to you today imbued by the spirit of the resistance that is channeled through those protests, where we can feel the anger, we can feel the anxiety, we can feel the confusion, yet we can also feel the joy, we can also feel the jubilance and the power that comes when people no longer put up with injustice, and this felt sense of what Otto called interconnection is realized. Before I dive us into a very deep journey, I want to activate in us a sense of humility, cultural humility. I just finished, as I said, my doctorate in an Ivy League institution. And to be honest, I feel ignorant to many of the lived conditions of other people. I need to know more. I need to really know more. And it is with that humility that I kind of use my curiosity to lean into this conversation and to learn about the past and to learn about other communities. Oftentimes, when we explore really deep issues, especially in relation to culture and race, we hold on to our worldviews, we hold on to who we are, how we are, where we are. And sometimes that holding creates a barrier. And I want us today to begin with humility, cultural humility, critical humility. And even though I am quote unquote educated, I myself feel like there's so much more for me to learn. And I want to say to Melanie Goodchild that I am so appreciative of you. My dissertation, I explored indigenous knowledge extensively and benefited greatly from reading First People's ways of being. In particular, the Cree people, some Anishinaabe. So the insight that I've gotten from those knowledges is this reverence for relationship, this reverence for just bowing down to each other's lived experiences. So it is with incredible gratitude that I am appreciative of you sharing this space with me today, Melanie. So just thank you for doing this with us today. And just wanted to thank you directly in light of all the knowledge that I was able to gain from sitting with indigenous knowledge. And today for me is almost like a closing of a loop where I give thanks to many of the indigenous scholars that I've been able to draw upon. With that being said, I'm going to share my screen and I will dive us into a journey. I will dive us into a journey that we've been curating for the last several years. And we've been working with it, titling it Contemplating 400 Years of Inequality. And it's a journey that originated for me personally at the New School in New York City, where several scholars from around the country began to ask the question, what will we do as a country in the United States when the year 2019 comes and we mark the 400th anniversary of the arrival of enslaved Africans to US soil in 1619 in Virginia. These scholars around 2016, 2017 thought that this was a momentous moment to recognize what this 400-year period has done to our culture, has done to our society, has done to the structures that are in place. And as you know, the New York Times 1619 Project is another part of this wave of initiatives in 2019 that tried to bring the public to think and see what has transpired in the last 400 years. So the 400 Years of Inequality Project emerges during that time, and the committee built a 4 by 20-foot timeline with dates, text that reveal to us different moments across the last 400 years that reveal how we end up in this moment. We've been able to travel all over the country. People have been able to take the timeline and explore it themselves. These are folks from all over the country that have been able to get together and just sit with the timeline. And what I've been doing is facilitating contemplating 400 years of inequality, which really is taking the timeline and with a contemplative approach, slowing down diving into the timeline and looking at what emerges. I want to have just 2 minutes, 2 minutes to settle us in our bodies, 2 minutes to just settle us in our hearts before we dive into this journey. I want to invite you to settle in your seats, wherever you are seated, laying down, wherever you are, just settle in your seats comfortably. Take a moment and think about humility. What does it mean for me to be humble in this moment? To be open in this moment as we dive into difficult history. History where I may be involved or I'm part of it. History where I may have no connection to. So just gently take a couple of deep breaths. I will set just a brief 2-minute timer for us. And just take a moment to just lean back onto your chair, feel the backrest. If you feel so comfortable, gently close your eyes and gently inhale and gently exhale. And continue to gently just sink into your breath. On your next exhale, let your shoulders drop. Let your shoulders just drop. And feel yourself sink even deeper into your chair. Take a couple more deep, gentle breaths. This is your exhale week. So together, now, let's take a deep breath together and an exhale together. And gently open your eyes. So here we go, folks. We'll dive into the first 200 years of the 400 years of inequality timeline, capturing around 400 years of data in the context of the United States of America. Take a moment to just scan your screens, Take in the red text. We will dive into the first quarter of the timeline. This is the second half. Second half of this 200-year period. And I want to invite you to breathe deeply into your diaphragm throughout this process. So we breathe together as we explore this history. Take a deep breath with me, and we will go in to this first quarter. I wish I could make the text bigger, but let this be just a grounding exercise to look at the last 4 centuries. In 1619, marking the arrival of 20 Africans to Jamestown who were abducted, taken from the African continent. In 1622 and 1636, the tensions that come with the attempt to take a native land, indigenous territory, and the violence that erupts. You are strangers here. You come here as strangers. The call of indigenous folk responding to colonial invasion. Take a deep breath, and we go deeper. We see in 1838, the Trail of Tears, where the Cherokee peoples are forcibly removed from their land. But we also see the attempt to eradicate slavery in 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation and the promise of freedom that is proposed by that. Take a deep breath. We go deeper. We look at 1896, where the Constitution legalized segregation. A major ruling that sets much of the table for the issues we deal with today. Take a deep breath with me, and we dive into the first half of the 20th century. Being very gentle with ourselves, looking at the images. Look at 1917, where 10,000 African Americans and their supporters marched down Fifth Avenue in a protest against lynching and violence against communities of color, especially the Black community. And we see this today, 100 years later. And even in 1918, when the Spanish flu unfolds, we now see similar manifestations with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been here before. Take a deep breath with me, and we go deeper. We see 1955 and 54 marking many of the struggles that started the civil rights movement and opened up an opportunity for integration. We see military involvement in terms of US policy. We see the Stonewall riots. And take a deep breath with me, and we will go deeper. Take a deep breath with me, and we will go deeper. We see in the bottom left corner the Rodney King, one of the most popular, infamous acts of police violence caught on camera. We see the interplay, the conflict of 9/11, the rise of school shootings in Columbine, the beginning of the war in Afghanistan, the World Trade protest in Seattle. Breathe with me, and we go deeper. We see the beautiful faces of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. We see the rise of Occupy. And in 2012, we see an example again of a miscarriage of justice with George Zimmerman when he murders Trayvon Martin, a young man, 17, who was just walking home from the grocery store. And in 2015, we see Brother Dylan Roof, whose heart was so full of hatred that he channeled it by killing 9 African Americans in a church in Charlotte, South Carolina. Breathe, and we go deeper. And of course, the last 3 years have felt like a decade. With elections, with resistance, with protest. And I want you to breathe and read to yourself. Respect my existence, or expect my resistance. Of course, the timeline ends here, but as we know, this quote here is so alive right now. And I want you to take a deep, deep breath. We have a few more images to explore. And the next image, you've seen it already. It is one that it's hard to stomach. So we must ready the spirit to see it. So breathe, we'll take a deep breath with me and we will go deeper. And gently sit with the real and the symbolic representation of this image, where Brother Floyd is pressed upon by an officer. Take a deep breath with me, and what this image and other images like this and situations, what they emerge, what they erupt, what they have produced, what they have enlivened. This is Los Angeles recently. Breathe with me. Breathe with me. Breathe with me. Breathe with me. This is the police station in Minneapolis. Breathe with me. I want to gently read this to you. We are not carrying for 9 months, then struggling during labor for 9 hours, just for you to kneel on their neck for 9 minutes. Black lives matter. The pain, the grief moves through our bodies as a collective body, as a global unit, feeling all of this. I want to invite you to take one more deep breath together. And we will now transition to some practices and ritual to process, let go, and sit longer with some of this work. I thank you. I thank Arawana. I thank Melanie. I invite Antoinette now to lead us.
So staying here on this image and staying with the feeling that may be in each one of us now. I'd like us to use the prompts that we have been using in our visual resonance practice to check in with ourselves now. And as Angel invited us in each moment to breathe with him, coming back and sitting with what may be emerging in our own mind, our own heart, and our own bodies. Before I turn it over to Arawana, I invite us to use the prompt, I see, I sense, or I feel. Just notice, what are you seeing, sensing, and feeling as you continue to look at this image and take in what we just saw? And type into the chat using I see, I sense, or I feel to share what is coming through for you now. Our hosts will read a few of these statements so we can sense the room.
I feel gutted with a fist in my throat. I see strength and determination. I feel anger. I sense repetition and vertigo.
I see immense suffering. I sense the long journey ahead of us. I feel sadness.
I feel impotence, determination to perpetually. I see fearlessness to dig into the will of action and change. I sense you all.
I feel my heart opening to things I did not want to see, and I feel before. I feel readiness to heal. I see patterns. I feel oppression. I see strength, fear, beauty of theater, not yet.
And with that, thank you all. Thank you, Angel. And we'll turn to Arawana for further connection to our bodies.
Thank you, Angel. So we we have been guided to continue with this blessing of our life, which is breathing. I can breathe. And breathing allows us to stay with the feeling quality. So we are
building capacity for heart strength. Because once we see more, once we know more, we also need to build this capacity to hold more and more sadness, more and more grief, more and more of whatever we're feeling. And let that feeling quality be the moisture or be the strength to engage, to act, to speak. So we'll stay with this sense of the feeling and embodiment of whatever we experience. And whatever that is, we welcome that. Whether there's enormous intensity of feeling, rage or sadness or confusion or whether there's numbness, it doesn't matter. We welcome everything. We welcome whatever it is we feel right now. And just note that. We feel it in the legs. We feel it in the belly. We feel it in the back, in the heart, in the throat, in the eyes. And whatever it is, this is our manifestation of what it is to be a human being right now. And to be a human being is always to be in connection with others. And it is in humanity. A sense of not being able to feel one's humanness. That is so, so dangerous. So right now, just taking this moment to feel what we feel. I'm going to ask you, if you can, and if you have the space, to actually stand for this next few moments. And if you don't feel that you can do that, that's fine also. But if you can stand up on your own feet, what it is that we actually stand for, I'm going to ask you to do that. You can feel that your feet are really on this good Mother Earth. That each of us lives on this earth. And we feel the openness of possibility, the top of the head and the sky. We feel that our body can join this earth full of all of its tears and shouts and wails, all of its stories. With the open space of a future which has not happened yet, with an open sky. And what joins the past with an open possibility for a future is the heart, is feeling. And the feeling of connection that not only in our body-mind system, but all of us together, the collective, the social body, the global social body, the heart of that. So from this feeling of heart, however you experience that in the body, just reflect on Angel's words and on the images that we saw. And if you could embody this in a body sculpture, which means a body shape that holds whatever the feeling quality is, please do that. It could be connected to the words that you wrote in the chat, or just a feeling quality. What is the shape that your body could make that holds this feeling? What is that? What does the body want to do? You don't need to be looking at the screen or anything like that right now. Just hold it, your shape. And whatever the feeling is, just hold. Just honor that, listen into that, let go of any thoughts about it. It's not about thinking. There's mental models, there's beliefs, there's assumptions, there's all sorts of ideas that make structure, but underneath that is the feeling. And racism lives in the body. It lives in the body. How we are on the planet lives in the body. So please feel that shape. Now, together, we have rested in this shape, listened in, intensified that shape, let go of any thought about that. Now, if we're not thinking, planning, if we're not trying to do anything, not trying to get a solution, a more pleasant, a more comfortable situation, if that body shape wanted to move somewhere, it doesn't want to stay here. This is not a sustainable shape, this moment. We are always moving, always changing. What does it want to change into? So begin the change now. Is it in the lower back starting? Is it in the neck? Is it the hands? Somewhere the movement starts. Let it start. Let it travel through the space. It doesn't matter what it is, whatever your body feels like doing, whatever the arms feel like, whatever the neck feels like. Tune to the body's knowing. The body knows where it wants to go, and then let it rest in this shape. This is what we call the sculpture 2 shape. Let it rest there. Just hold it still, please. Feeling the back of the body, legs, the hands, the shoulders, belly, the heart, the face, the jaw. Let that body be full of this feeling. Now, holding the feeling, please say to yourself, or let a word or a couple of words, a phrase, or an image, let it come to your mind as though the shape had a voice. And then just you can say it to yourself. What is that voice? What is it saying, this shape? And once you have your words and your voice, if you could just drop that shape. Please pay attention to an awareness of your surroundings, your room, where you are. And then very easily, if you could just return to your chair. And just rest there for a moment. Just rest with whatever that small journey was from your first feeling shape to your second. And I invite Melanie.
Oh, thank you, Miigwech. Pojo and Dino Amagan and Duck. Wapske or get you to players and indigenous cause. Usto dem, Bitagang Nishnabig, Dunjaba, Kiriganzi be Dunjaba. Miigwech Skaka McQuig, Mijiayang, Nabishki, Mijiayang, Mijim. Sema Nabagana, Giwednang, Wabnang, Janang, Meanwhile Ninga Bianang. Miigwech Skakamakwe gave me Jiayang and Ishnabe, the Bomatswin. Miigwech Gijimanato gave me Jiayang and Ishnabe, Mino Bomatswin. Greetings, I said greetings to you, all of my relatives, all of my relations. I want to express my condolences to the people who have lost family members recently, to police violence, to COVID, to the ongoing conflicts and traumas that human beings inflict upon each other, to the traumas that we inflict upon Mother Earth. And I wanted to share with you today some thoughts as I thought about systemic violence. And I wanted to share with you some medicines. I was thinking about out of Anishinaabe Ijitawawin, which is our culture and our ceremonies. That's where I go when I experience grief, when I saw those images of death and violence that were happening right before my eyes. And I was heartbroken, like so many of us. And I thought about cedar. I thought about grandmother cedar. That is what spoke to me. Because cedar is one of our medicines, one of our 4 sacred medicines. And cedar is the medicine that restores balance. Cedar is a line of communication. We say, Gijiga tig. Gijiga tig is cedar, grandmother cedar. And it's a line to the Manadog, to the spirits, and to the Adzukanag, to the teachings and the customs. And you know, I was in my younger scholarly days, I was a sociologist, and I studied the sociology of medicine. And I started to think about the systemic violence that has occurred through human created systems and angels, the timeline. It laid out in heartbreaking detail the anniversary in 2019 of the first enslaved peoples arriving on the shores of Turtle Island. And then we have many, thousands of years of a timeline before that. The Australian elders reminded us of that earlier in the Gaia journey, 60,000 years. And we draw upon the knowledge to deal with what we're facing right now. And, I had the opportunity to study medicine, and I had an opportunity to the sociology of medicine and to teach at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine and to think about the system of medicine, healthcare, one of these systems that we've created in our society. And we've created policing and the legal system and economic systems. And the history of medicine shows us a history of inequality, of unequal access to care. And I was thinking specifically in terms of violence of human experimentation, that vulnerable peoples were taken against their will, without consent, and experimented upon. And when we think of the atrocities of human experimentation in World War II, but in Nazi medicine, In America, on that timeline, is the Tuskegee study of syphilis in the Negro male in 1932 in Alabama, where 600 African-American men people were not treated, those that had syphilis. And even after penicillin was found in the 1950s to be a treatment for that disease, were not given that medicine. And where I am in Canada, and I'm here in the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. I'm in near Niagara Falls. And this is the place of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Three Fires Confederacy. And I'm Anishinaabe. So, you know, in English, I'm called Melanie, named after my dad, Delaney, and my mom, Melinda. So every time I say my name in English, and I said my spirit names when I introduced myself, but I recall my dad, who went to residential school, and my mom, who went to Indian day school. Anyway, that's my name. Melanie is half Delaney and half Melinda, but it's spelled like Melanie. And my mom keeps telling me not to tell people they spelled it wrong, but it would have been Aney for Melanie. But I think about what they went through, their trauma in having gone to residential school. And in residential school, there were experimentations on children. There was on malnutrition, the withholding of nutrition, to see what happened to the malnourished body. And children are not given dental care to see the effect of malnourishment on dental care. And these are, you know, within our lifetimes that I'm thinking about these experimentations, these, you know, atrocities in the name of science and medicine. And then I think about COVID-19 and the time that we're in now, and how in the late 19th century and early 20th century here in Canada, we had another pandemic, and it affected others, of course, in the world, tuberculosis, TB. And in TB, they set up a sanatorium in one of our Western provinces in 1910 to treat people. But TB was affecting Indigenous peoples at much higher rates. We had active, deadly cases of TB. And so it was presented a theory by doctors that we as Indigenous peoples were more biologically and racially susceptible to tuberculosis, when in fact TB was caused by poverty, dislocation, malnutrition, overcrowded housing, conditions that were brought to our people by colonization. And the response of the medical system in Canada was, in fact, to label it Indian tuberculosis and to create fear in white people and settlers that we were causing a pandemic. And so the sanatorium was set up, and Indigenous peoples did not get accepted into that sanatorium until the mid-1900s, after it had been controlled in the white population. So there was a narrative of, you know, fear. And we see that in other systems we've set up, a narrative of fear around bodies. You know, when you're a person of color, you embody what people are projecting onto you. And we see that with the police brutality and what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And, you know, I looked at history and I thought about that. I thought about, you know, the inequality of the system and how that's not just a condition of individual beliefs and prejudices about racism, but we've embedded those beliefs, those mental models into the systems that we've created. And so despite the systemic racism that happened in Canada with Indigenous peoples, in fact, what happened was the Department of Indian Affairs set up Indian hospitals. And so we had segregation as well. Set up hospitals, and you had beds available in white hospitals, and yet Indigenous patients would get turned away. And yet we continue into the more modern times. There's a beautiful book called Structures of Indifference. James Sinclair. And the case of, is in this book of, Brian Sinclair, Structures of Indifference. Brian Sinclair was an Anishinaabe man, and he showed up at a hospital in Winnipeg in 2008, so bringing us from the days of TB to 2008. And he sat in a waiting room waiting for care for a treatable infection in his catheter. He was in a wheelchair. And for 34 hours, he sat there as staff member after staff member did not attend to his care, and he died. And this was caught on video. You can see images of Brian sitting in his wheelchair. And that was heartbreaking when I read that book. And I thought about that because I was the director of health policy and planning for a tribal council here in Canada for 7 years. And I fought for the rights of our peoples as it related to unequal access to healthcare. And Brian's case is heartbreaking. He had a treatable infection, but he died of sepsis. He died before our very eyes on video. And this book, there was studies of how that happened and how that's been repeated for people of color who are accessing what should be a system of care and healing. And yet we still talk about universal health care in Canada. So we have these narratives that valorize white settlements, that valorize, these American and Canadian dreams and things like that across Turtle Island. And yet we have Indigenous peoples and Black peoples who are suffering now under COVID at unequal rates. So I liked Angel one time, I heard you say, it's difficult to reckon with this, but we need a reckoning. We need a reckoning with our past of these stories, these many, many stories that we don't learn about in our education system. Canadians often say, I didn't know that happened in residential schools. I didn't know there were nutrition experiments. In fact, those nutritional experiments only came to light after a scholar spoke about them and talked about them a few years ago. And so what I wanted to do today was to speak about how Brian was ignored to death and how our peoples are really needing to, when we feel that anger and we feel that, grief together for these injustices collectively, what we do as Indigenous peoples and Anishinaabe is that we turn to our medicines. And that's what I wanted to offer here today. When I think about and picture and see the images, and I've seen the images, and we saw them again today, and how heartbreaking that is. And we need to process that and move through that so that we learn the lessons. We've been given these lessons so many times through history, and we need to, is this going to be different? And so in order to hold on to that, what I wanted to do is I wanted to burn some cedar for us. And when we do that, we harvested the cedar in a good way, and we offered sema. And I'd like us to sit quietly together as I burn the cedar for us. And I have some dried cedar. We prepared some dried cedar. So I'm going to turn my camera down. And as you watch this grandmother cedar, she's a connection to the spirit world. Fire is a connection. It's a portal. That's why we have sacred fires. We had sacred fires for people in their honor. That's what we do at our traditional burials. And so balance, which is wishke we ziwin, is the restoration of balance. And this is to help us restore our balance, because anger and grief puts us off balance, spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And we want to prepare to be in a balanced place as we move forward together and think about what comes next, right? What comes next after this violence. So I am going to Apichago Miigwech Bizindawiyag. Thank you for listening and for the respect that you've shown for this burning and offering of cedar. And the burning of the cedar goes into the spirit world, and our ancestors and those we've lost can smell those medicines. So George Floyd can smell those medicines. Brian Sinclair, he can smell those medicines. Breonna Taylor. We offer food. We often burn food in a fire, Stode, or sacred fires, and the burning of the medicines is how we transform them into the spiritual realm, and we activate that spiritual connection with our ancestors and with those who have gone before us into the spirit world. And so in their honor, I wanted to just offer that to those our group, to say that, you know, together we can find ways to cope, to help each other, and to move forward in a good way, in an ethical way. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, to sit in circle with you once more, to learn from, you know, what everybody's experiencing, and to have this conversation together. It's a difficult conversation, and it's important. And I will keep the cedar burning throughout the rest of our conversation. And I started it before we gathered today. So, miigwech.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Arawana. Thank you, Angel. And thank you to everybody for sitting and being with all that has come up so far in our time together. As we move forward, we will move into breakout rooms, and I invite us to call to our mind and to our body the memory of our sculpture 1 to sculpture 2. And that tool of moving from sculpture 1 to sculpture 2, of sitting and staying with the body, is part of the movement that we need to process and to move forward. And now integrating the ceremony that Melanie just brought us through, I invite you to sit with what is the collective social sculpture that we need to move forward. So what is the collective social sculpture that we need to move forward? And perhaps where you are right now is still sculpture 1 to sculpture 2, or there's something else that's on your heart that needs to be shared in this time together. We will give about 12 minutes to connect with each other. And the invitation is to recognize that, bringing us back to the cultural humility that Angel shared with us and invited us to sit with earlier, that each of us is coming in with a different experience, a different lived experience, a different ancestral experience, and a different relationship to what has been shared today. And that each of those experiences are valid, and that we hold an open mind, an open heart, and an open will to what is wanting to emerge in our conversations. And the invitation is to let each person in your breakout speak once before anyone speaks twice, and that we hope to give enough time to attempt to hear each other in this time together and process together. So enjoy your time in the breakouts, and we'll see you back here in about 12 to 15 minutes to close. So if you're with us on YouTube, we'll be back in about 30 seconds. If you're in the rooms, we're just about back. I think we're all here. So thank you all for sharing with us. Each of your breakout rooms seem to be just coming back. Yep. Okay, 30 more seconds. Still waiting on one more room to come back. But as you come back in, I think we're all here. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to connect with each other, with yourselves. What we'd like to do is open for the last bit of our time together for all of us to share, and also for all of the guides and holders of today's session to also be able to respond and share as well. So we will hear from each of you or whoever would like to share. We won't have time for the few hundred of us to all share verbally, but if you would like to share in the chat, either in the chat function on Zoom or in the comments on YouTube, and if you would like to share with us via voice and video across the channels, you can go down on if you're on a computer, to the participants function at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on the participants function, and then on the right side, click on the little blue hand, and that will open up, that will show us that you want to speak, and we'll be able to bring you in across all of our channels. So we'd love to hear what came up for you. Perhaps there was a collective social sculpture that came through, or perhaps something else came up that you would really like to share. We'll go with Archer, Melissa Correa on.
Hello everyone. Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I want to share that I was in the room with David Green and Selena, and I want to share the feeling that we have together. Is this accept the curiosity and the courage to ask, can we breathe together? And the next step is how you do this, can we breathe together? And that is the most moment of awareness between our experience in our group. And I want to share, can we breathe together, and how we do this as a curiosity movement.
Beautiful. Thank you, Archer. We're going to move to Sarah F., I believe.
Hi there. For me, that was a really powerful experience towards the end, looking at the group tableau, if you like. And for me, what the representation that came to mind was a flock of birds, and looking at how when we're in touch with our spirit and our soul, in the way everybody on the call today really led us on these different journeys of the heart. And for me, when humans or when animals are in that place, they don't think about what way to go. They flow, they ebb, and they go with the winds and the tides. And And for me, it felt like that's what this journey represents. This Gaia journey for me is as really building our inner strength to the point where we can ebb and flow as a movement out into the world and really be strong in the space of all of the prevailing winds or the storms or the, shall we say, violence. So it was a really deep experience for me, and I just thank my group members also for amazing time together.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's powerful to hear that collective tableau experience. We've got Letta, I believe, coming in next.
Yeah, for us, there were three of us, and the two of us were very similar in terms of the group sculptor, the holding hands. But Megan was also with us in the moving together. For her, it was moving together, whether it's holding hands or breathing together. That's the kind of thing that was the social sculptor that she had. But Mikhail and myself, it was this holding hands because we were coming from an area of anger at what has happened and everything that's happening. And as we moved forward, it was as if we were going to fight. But then thinking of holding hands, then it sort of changed our feeling and our sculptor. Thank you.
Thank you, Letta. I love that image, and we'll keep holding that. Mukara next.
Otto set such a wonderful example of how we can approach the challenges that we're sitting with. I felt like with his vulnerability and just going through step by step how he had responded to what was happening really touched me and evoked my commitment to use this approach as I continue to try to be a part of building a new world. So that's all.
Thank you. Next up, Jerry.
Yes, hello everyone. I was grateful for my group of three and listening to the hearts of my fellows. I wanted to share that there is an opportunity to heal the way that we think about our movement forward by putting to the forefront those of us who have been most affected, not just in their presence in how they may appear, because race is an illusion, a very meaningful one, made to be meaningful because of oppression, but in the ways that we look, listen, learn, heal, bring into space. So I would like to call briefly on and share. Mumma baby oh, lali kamara. Mumma baby oh, Allah. Hey baby oh, hey baby oh, Allah. Hey baby oh, yeah. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you. Thank you so much. Just letting us hold that song, that voice. Thank you, Jerry. And we'll move to Cody next.
Thank you for that. That was powerful. That was a very powerful healing song. Just taking a moment to resonate with that feeling. To show that power of that gift. I don't like to use the word power. To use that gift in such a way and to share that with everybody, I say miigwech. That healing, that emotion and that joy all at the same time is very strong and intense. And it affects people like it just affected me more when there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. When there's a lot that you're holding on to. That needs respect and acknowledgement. And I just wanted to share that through my Trinity, that symbol, that group, we talked, and they shared that we all felt the same, and we all saw the same, and we explored that together to find the how and just to feel. And it gave me confirmation on building a light lodge or some temple or a place where we can come together as one and share culture, share teachings, to find those teachings in the ceremonies, the parts that we lost. We can come together and find all of those if we come together as one tribe, not forgetting in our blood is all mixed and we are not separated anymore, and we never really were. But use all of this to come together and share our teachings and our knowledge so that we can find a way to make a program, a new path, collectively coming together to protect our children that feel this pain. And they shouldn't feel this pain. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you all for being in the feeling of this moment, for being in the pain, because as we see and sense it, it's the first step towards healing it. I'd like to turn it over to Kelvy, as I know, Kelvy, you've been holding us this entire time, for this entire journey. But today, I pass it over to you now.
I'll keep my camera on the drawing, and I don't have much to say other than the desire to stay with the winds of healing and the winds of change that hold us to these truths that we are facing now.
Thank you, Kelvy. I invite us to take a breath together and take a look at this image. With the words I see, I sense, and I feel. Taking a breath, a collective inhale. holding it. And collective exhale, being with this image. And as you feel called to, type in the chat using the prompts, I see, I sense, and I feel. And our hosts will read them out.
I see birds, doves, the spirit flying upwards. I sense moving forward together. I feel the winds changing us all. I see smoke.
I see cracks opening, leading us deeper and deeper. I feel a powerful tide of change. I see healing fire, fire from our hearts. I feel a revolution of awareness is emerging.
I feel the birthing power of this moment that gives us, each of us, to be all in from the cellular level. I feel connected. I see white birds flying to the sun. I sense hope. I see smoke of ritual welcoming us home. I sense a more profound renaissance. I see a web connecting all human beings together. I see, I feel, I act. I sense our exhale as the wind of knowing. I see light. I sense us finally coming together and moving into a new future.
Andrea.
I feel fire roaring, breaking through. I see compassion in action. I feel the winds of change. I feel the healing. I feel the support from friends around the world. I sense lifting, rising together. I sense an immense acceleration into the light. I feel the healing.
I feel sadness being lifted.
Thank you. Thank you all for staying with this moment and for sharing. I would like to invite Arawana, Melanie, Angel, Otto to share closing comments with us.
I will just say thank you again for sitting with us today. I want to say my apologies to Melanie for not understanding the power and pronunciation of your name. And I want to say that we can breathe together. We can breathe together. We did today. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. And thank you.
Appreciate so much. Just really appreciate everyone coming together, and that in itself is a real step that we can be together and feel together and share. So I also express gratefulness, appreciation for everyone.
Miigwech, I wanted to share, this is my Migaze Miguan eagle feather case, the holder, and you'll see the ribbon colors there, black, red, white, and yellow. I spoke about it last week, and I just wanted to share again the 8th fire prophecy of when the great nations, the black, the red, the yellow, the white people, we would all come together, and there's many more nations, and that was a prophecy before our ancestors ever saw people with different colored skin. That interpretation of the different colored skin was that we were coming from 4 directions to bring each other gifts, that we would share and we would cultivate those gifts, and then we would come together and share. And I think that's where we're heading now. This is the fulfillment of the 8th fire, this conversation together from the 4 directions. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to acknowledge Angel, when you shared how you've learned from Indigenous scholars, and I was thinking, people often ask me when I get frustrated as a student, or get frustrated with conversations that we've been having for so long about racism and inequity. I say, I go read Bell Hooks. That's I go read the way that the gift that she has for language. And I had the opportunity to go to TED Women 2017 in San Francisco and listen to Kimberly Crenshaw and to the women who founded Black Lives Matter. And I think that's what this is, this time that we're coming to. And now we're really coming to it as we're isolated, as as the elders talked about earlier in Gaia from Australia. Katie and John Stubley hosted and brought into the conversation Richard, Noel, Richard, and Carol. And I'm struck by what they said about 60,000 years of coded knowledge. And we all have that. We're all tapping into the knowledge of our ancestors collectively. We all have ancestors. So it was beautiful to sit here. And I just wanted to offer some medicines again for the tears that were shed. Tears are really healing. It's good to sit there and cry and to let that out and not hold it in. And that this is one of the medicines that we use. When people cry, we light this. And so I'll finish by lighting this medicine here for us, the sage, the purification, so that we opened in a good way. We opened talking about humility, and we'll close in a good way together. So Apachugo Maguch Bizindawiyag. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Melanie, for co-holding the space, and also for a space that allows us to participate in the context of the 8th fire prophecy that you just shared with us. And thank you, Angel, for allowing us, for helping us to breathe together in the face of the unspeakable. And thank you, Arawana, for allowing us to really take this collective pain into a dimension that, as I felt in my breakout group, that makes it really personable and therefore also actionable. So this session really was about systemic racism, and we saw 3 main dimensions of that, right? The genocide against indigenous people, the 400 plus years of racism, and also the violence we enact against nature, against animals, against all other living beings. And how I feel and what I notice is that maybe this has been part of something that we notice around us, which is a deep process of becoming aware and of healing. That is passing these three thresholds, right? The first one being ignorance and learning to see. The second one being the closed heart and learning how to sense and feel. And the third one being apathy and learning how to act on what we see and feel. And the real question, of course, we remain with is that action part. And there's some of that we can do individually. We have to do individually. But then there is another part, a profound part that deals with a collective dimension that has to do with a new social contract, because the old one is broken and already hitting the walls. And that's where this journey, kind of we are all on together, needs to be continued. And that, will lead us not only into next week and the next day and what happens after this session, but into the years and decades ahead of us. Antoinette.
Thank you, Otto. Thank you all. I'd like to invite us to take a breath together. So I will put one hand on the chest and one hand on the belly, just to activate that space that Martin Kalungubanda brought us into, of being able to activate these spaces that Otto just invited us into as well, which is the open mind, the open heart, and the open will to act. And to do this, I invite us to exhale everything out of the body, to connect into the roots through the feet. Inhale together and exhale completely. To be reminded of the connection to sky that Arawana shared with us. And as we inhale and exhale, just staying connected to the vertical quality that each of us carries of being human. Being on our piece of earth, being connected to sky, and finding a deep sense of opening of the heart. And connecting into that space just below the belly button. Knowing that we each have the capacity to be with the pain, to be with the fear, and to step into what's needed of us now, what is being called of us now, as individuals and as a collective. Inhale together. Fill the belly, fill the chest, fill the collarbones. And exhale, releasing out and down and taking that into our communities, into all the spaces where we know we can act, where our one voice can hold what's needed to be held. And I invite our collective stance to be active as we move forward together. So thank you all for being in this incredibly deep and healing space, for seeing and sensing together. And I look forward to seeing you all in the interwebs with the hashtag Gaia Journey, where we can stay connected, and to just continue hearing all of our thoughts and just hearing all of our voices as we move forward and what actions we're each taking. So thank you all. Thank you to all of our guides. Thank you to all of our ancestors and teachers. Thank you, Angel, Arawana, Melanie, Otto, Kelvy, and thank you, everybody. See you again soon. We can all unmute and say goodbye.
Thank you.